voice. Okay, typically shows some fear or anxiety. We could even actually use this word in terms of if she's angry, but in this case, not quite. Okay. Look at the address. How could they possibly know where he sleeps? You don't think they're watching the house? Watching, spying, might be following us, muttered Uncle Vernon wildly. But what should we do, Vernon? Should we write back? Tell them we don't want. Harry could see Uncle Vernon's shiny black shoes pacing up and down the kitchen. So typically when someone is pacing up and down, they are nervous or angry in some manner, and we have established that they are both, right, in this situation. Okay, and like we discussed earlier, okay, they already don't know how anybody could know that Harry is living under the stairs. Okay, so they've decided that, okay, they're probably being spied upon. No, he said finally. No, we'll ignore it. If they don't get an answer, yes, that's the best. We won't do anything. But I'm not having one in the house, Petunia. Didn't we swear when we took him in we'd stamp out that dangerous nonsense? That evening, when he got back from work, Uncle Vernon did something he'd never done before. He visited Harry in his cupboard. Where's my letter? Said Harry, the moment Uncle Vernon had squeezed through the door. Who's writing to me? So this suggests that the space is quite small because we know that Uncle Vernon is someone who's quite large, very tall, as well as he is a bit on the bigger side, okay? Actually, he's very large. No, I do believe Harry has mentioned that. And Harry is very scrawny, very small, so he fits into that cupboard, right? So he had squeezed. He didn't just go inside. He squeezed himself inside, okay, through the door. No one. It was addressed to you by mistake, said Uncle Vernon shortly. I burned it. It was not a mistake, said Harry angrily. It had my cupboard on it. Silence, yelled Uncle Vernon, and a couple of spiders fell from the ceiling. He took a few deep breaths and then forced his face into a smile, which looked quite painful. Yes, Harry, about this cupboard. Your aunt and I have been thinking. You're really getting a bit big for it. We think it might be nice if you moved into Dudley's second bedroom. Why? Said Harry. Don't ask questions, snapped his uncle. Take the stuff upstairs now. The Dursleys' house had 4 bedrooms, one for Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia, one for visitors, usually Uncle Vernon's sister, Marge, one where Dudley slept, and one where Dudley kept all the toys and things that wouldn't fit into his first bedroom. It only took Harry one trip upstairs to move everything he owned from the cupboard to his room. He sat down on the bed and stared around him. Nearly everything in here was broken. The month-old video camera was lying on top of a small, working tank Dudley had once driven over the next door neighbor's dog. In the corner was Dudley's first ever television set, where he'd put his foot through when his favorite program had been cancelled. There was a large bird cage, which had once held a parrot that Dudley had swapped at school for a real air rifle, which was up on a shelf with the end all bent because Dudley had sat on it. Other shelves were full of books. They were the only things in the room that looked as though they'd never been touched. So a few things here again, okay? And welcome to anybody who's just joined the live. My name is teacher Judith. We're going through chapter 3 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Okay, so I hope you are joining along with us, okay? If you'd like to, let us know what books you would like us to read, or if you have read the books and you have comments about it, anything you don't understand, anything you want to debate, okay? I know there's a lot of debate around the characters in Harry Potter and who people like and don't like. Though we're only in chapter 3, we can already kind of suss out, right, which characters we might like and not so much. So take note of that, okay, and maybe just give us some comments, if you will. Okay. Okay. So where were we? So we're talking about Harry being moved to Dudley's second bedroom. Okay. So now take this into account. Okay. Just consider this for a moment, because we know that the Dursleys took Harry Potter in, okay, against their will, right? They didn't have a choice. He had been quite literally dropped at their doorstep, okay. And then Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon, they had this little conversation just in the previous page. He said, "Didn't we swear when we took him in, we'd stamp out that dangerous nonsense?" So we know there's some controversy about this surrounding Harry Potter, and we still don't know exactly what it is, okay, even though we know he is their legitimate nephew, okay? But they definitely don't like him, and they like to make sure that he knows it, okay? So here, okay, we know that they were trying to figure out if they've been watched, right? So spying might be following us wildly, because Aunt Petunia said, how could they possibly know where he sleeps? Again, nobody outside the household knows that he sleeps in a cupboard. So Uncle Vernon's now squeezed himself into the cupboard to try and look for surveillance cameras or something of the sort, okay? But he can't find any of the information. So instead, he's like, oh, okay, actually you're getting too big for this cupboard. Why not let's move you to to Dudley's second bedroom. So the fact that they had a second bedroom, which means they had the space for Harry the whole time, but they didn't want to give it to him. So that just puts into perspective their relationship, okay? And how strained it might be, how they do not regard Harry as family in that sense, okay? So, and Dudley kept all his toys and broken things in his room. So another good or quite sad statement, but it's a one-liner that tells us a lot of information, okay, is this. It says, "It only took Harry one trip upstairs to move everything he owned from the cupboard to his room." So that puts into perspective the amount of things he owns, the amount of things he has to his name, that they even cared to give him, or that he has because they are hand-me-downs in some way, versus Dudley, who has not one but two bedrooms because he has so many things that all the broken things that he has that he doesn't care for anymore can fit into the spare bedroom, okay? And Harry does not have even a fraction of those things. Okay, so many things, right? He has a month-old video camera that's broken, so that's one thing. A small working tank. Tank here suggests like a toy tank that's, you know, for whatever reason, remote control possibly. Dudley's first ever television set, which suggests that he maybe has another, you know, this is not the only one he's ever had. And he regularly put his foot through it, so he kicked it around when his show was cancelled. Okay, there was a large bird cage, which the parrot that was once living in it, he traded away for a rifle. Okay, apparently that's a very normal thing for 11-year-olds to do, which was up on the shelf with the end all bent because Dudley had sat on it. Again, this talks about Dudley and his carelessness, his all these things. These are all good things to mention because it tells us a lot about Dudley's character as well as the family. Okay, without actually telling us things like, oh, he was arrogant, oh, he was, you know, they're using descriptions and things that are tangible within the room to explain this. And then it says, other shelves were full of books. They were the only things in the room that looked as though they'd never been touched. So this tells us that Dudley is not a reader. He likes all these things. He likes air rifles, but he does not like books. From downstairs came the sound of Dudley bawling at his mother. "I don't want him in there. I need that room. Make him get out." Okay, bawling is crying very loudly. Okay, loud wailing. Okay, and he's obviously being quite full of himself here because he's upset to get rid of his second bedroom, which he doesn't actually need. Okay, so Harry sighed and stretched out on the bed. Yesterday, he'd have given anything to be up here. Today, he'd rather be back in his cupboard with that letter than up here without it. And they'd also lied to him, right? They said that the letter was not actually for him, that it was mistaken. Okay. Next morning at breakfast, everyone was rather quiet. Dudley was in shock. He'd screamed, whacked his father with his smelting stick, been sick on purpose, kicked his mother, and thrown his tortoise through the greenhouse roof, and he still didn't have his room back. Harry was thinking about this time yesterday and bitterly wishing he'd opened the letter in the hall. Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia kept looking at each other darkly. Okay, so now it's a bit of a strange turn of events. So it's kind of a good thing that Harry got a larger room out of this, right? But he, in the process, while getting this thing, lost the one thing that he really wanted in the moment, which was his letter, right? This proof that somebody knows he exists in this household, that he has maybe other people who are know about him because he's extremely lonely and he's wanted, right, all his life to just have a random stranger to suddenly turn up and tell him that actually they are relatives. So, yeah. So Harry was once thinking about the time, yes. So he said, wishing he'd opened the letter in the hall. So he really wished he didn't just walk around and give everybody their letters and hold his own. He should have opened it before he even got to them. Okay? And then Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia kept looking at each other darkly because they are not happy with the situation. And now Dudley is also in shock because for the first time in his life, okay, all the things that he did, he even got being sick on purpose. This suggests that he vomited, okay, on purpose. All these things, this fuss he kicked up, and it wasn't enough. Okay, so it's quite an interesting morning, and that's why it's rather quiet because they're all three sets, all groups. Okay, so Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon, Dudley and Harry, they're all having mixed emotions about this incident that just happened the night before. When the mail arrived, Uncle Vernon, who seemed to be trying to be nice to Harry, made Dudley go and get it. They heard him banging things with his smelting stick all the way down the hall. Then he shouted, "There's another one! Mr. H. Potter, the smallest bedroom, number 4 Privet Drive." With a strangled cry, Uncle Vernon leapt from his seat and ran down the hall, Harry right behind him. Uncle Vernon had to wrestle Dudley to the ground to get the letter from him, which was made difficult by the fact that Harry had grabbed Uncle Vernon around the neck from behind. After a minute of confused fighting, in which everyone got hit a lot by the smelting stick, Uncle Vernon straightened up, gasping for breath, with Harry's letter clutched in his hand. "Go to your cupboard. Your bedroom," he wheezed at Harry. "Dudley, go. Just go." Harry walked round and round his new room. Someone knew he had moved out of his cupboard, and they seemed to know he hadn't received his first letter. Surely that meant they'd try again, and this time he'd make sure they didn't fail. He had a plan. So now Harry is extremely determined, okay? He knows this other person, whoever is sending him this letter, he knows that they know quite a bit about his situation to some degree because they know that he hasn't received his letter. And that's the only reason why they could have sent another one. So he's like, okay, if you are going to try, so am I. Okay? And even Uncle Vernon, okay, he tried so hard to get that letter. With a strangled cry, which means he's extremely frustrated, okay, and this is something that he does not want to happen, okay, he leapt from his seat and ran down the hall. And even Dudley, who is the one who announced the letter, he wanted the letter, and this puts into perspective again, okay, based on how they were all feeling, quite complex about this situation. Okay, Dudley likely wants to know who sent the letter or what the letter contains, so that he can figure out why everybody's acting so strangely and why Harry is getting suddenly special treatment in his eyes. Okay. The repaired alarm clock rang at 6 o'clock in the morning. Harry turned it off quickly and dressed silently. He mustn't wake the Dursleys. He stole downstairs without turning on any of the lights. He stole downstairs. Okay, this suggests that he crept downstairs quickly, okay, before anybody could notice. So he stole downstairs. And all of this, he turned it off quickly, dressed silently, because he specifically mustn't wake the Dursleys. It's 6 o'clock in the morning and he has a plan to exact, okay? He was going to wait for the postman on the corner of Privet Drive and get the letters for number 4 first. His heart hammered as he crept across the dark hall towards the front door. So this is him being stealthy, right? Sleuthy. And his heart is hammering in his chest because he's so nervous he doesn't want to get caught. And no matter what, he was going to get that letter. Ah! Harry leapt into the air. He trodden on something big and squashy on the doormat. Something alive. Okay, and notice that the family never talked about having pets at home. So he's probably wondering what that is. Lights clicked on upstairs, and to his horror, Harry realized that the big squashy something had been his uncle's face. Uncle Vernon had been lying at the foot of the front door in a sleeping bag, clearly making sure that Harry didn't do exactly what he'd been trying to do. He shouted at Harry for about half an hour and then told him to go and make a cup of tea. Harry shuffled miserably off into the kitchen, and by the time he got back, the mail had arrived, right into Uncle Vernon's lap. Harry could see 3 letters addressed in green ink. "I want," he began, but Uncle Vernon was tearing the letters in 2 pieces before his very eyes. Uncle Vernon didn't go to work that day. He stayed at home and nailed up the mail slot. "See," he explained to Aunt Petunia through a mouthful of nails, "if they can't deliver them, they'll just give up." "I'm not sure that'll work, Vernon." "Oh, these people's minds work in strange ways, Petunia. They're not like you and me," said Uncle Vernon, trying to knock in a nail with a piece of fruit cake Aunt Petunia had just brought him. So a lot of things here again, okay? He successfully intercepted the letter, right, that fell into his lap. And this time, though, instead of just sending 1, they actually sent 3. Okay, 3 letters, 3 of the same letters for Harry. And Uncle Vernon did the most terrible thing he could do. He tore them up in front of Harry, so that no matter what, he knew that he wouldn't be able to read it. Okay? And then this man, who we know is someone who's a bit of a workaholic, okay, he's very focused on his business and earning money. He stayed home that day to do this thing. Okay, he nailed up the mail slot. Now we're talking about traditional houses in the UK. So let's say this is the front door. They typically had a slot in the door like this. Okay, my very my terrible drawings, but yes, they had a slot in the door like this, so the mailman would just slip it through this slot in the door, and so that's why the mail would always end up on the doormat. Okay, so some houses did not have a letterbox or things like that. Okay, and that's why he was sleeping in a sleeping bag right by the door. So now that he's nailed it shut, he put some wood across it, and he said, no, if they can't send any mails through, deliver any mails through the mail slot, they're going to stop. So where are we next? On Friday, no less than 12 letters arrived for Harry. So first there was 1. Okay, there was 1 letter, then 1 letter again, then 3 letters, and now 12. Okay, all addressed to Harry. As they couldn't go through the mail slot, they had been pushed under the door, slotted through the sides, and a few even forced through the small window in the downstairs bathroom. Uncle Vernon stayed at home again. After burning all the letters, he got out a hammer and nails and boarded up the cracks around the front and back doors so no one could go out. He hummed, tiptoe through the tulips as he worked, and jumped at small noises. So he kind of knows that this is something that he shouldn't be doing. Okay, it is a hazard, right? So basically, if the door has what do you call Okay, this is getting... Okay, if the door has paneling, right, there's usually some air and light that gets through there, but he's basically boarding all of this up and making sure that there is no way anybody can get through any crevice, okay, into their house from outside, to make sure that Harry does not get this letter. So think about the intensity and the degree in which he's going to make sure that Harry doesn't get a letter. Okay, for some reason, none of them know what the letter contains, but clearly the parents know something about it because they don't want Harry to be receiving, even looking at this letter, even for a moment. On Saturday, things began to get out of hand. 24 letters to Harry found their way into the house, rolled up and hidden inside each of the 24 eggs that their very confused milkman had handed Aunt Petunia through the living room window. So notice this, okay? They've boarded up every nook and cranny from the windows as well as the doors. And instead, the letters were found inside the eggs, okay? So imagine how an unbroken egg can even hold anything other than a running egg inside, okay? No idea. So 24 letters were hidden in 24 eggs. So 2 trays of eggs were not eggs, they were letters instead. Okay, while Uncle Vernon made furious telephone calls to the post office and the dairy trying to find someone to complain to, Aunt Petunia shredded the letters in her food processor. Okay, so now they've had a lot of letters already. They've had 1, and then 1, and then 3, and then 12, and then 24 at the same time. Okay, so that's 5 days of consistent delivery of the letters, and still it didn't work. Okay, who on earth wants to talk to you this badly? Dudley asked Harry in amazement. On Sunday morning, Uncle Vernon sat down at the breakfast table, looking tired and rather ill, but happy. No post on Sundays, he reminded them cheerfully, as he spread marmalade on his newspapers. No letters today. Something came whizzing down the kitchen chimney as he spoke, and caught him sharply on the back of the head. Next moment, 30 or 40 letters came pelting out of the fireplace like bullets. The Dursleys ducked, but Harry leapt into the air trying to catch one. Okay, so now that all these letters, now how many of these are there? That's 36, 39, 40, 41 letters didn't make it. Now on Sunday, there's not supposed to be any post, okay, because the Dursleys are assuming that the letters are being sent by the post office, which is why he was having this angry conversation with them on the phone. Okay, but clearly that's not the case, because it came whizzing down the kitchen chimney as he spoke. Okay, it caught him sharply in the back of the head, so it hit him. Okay, and then 30 or 40 letters came pelting out of the fireplace like bullets. So imagine the fireplace is not something where things come out of typically, okay? It's only used to burn wood and as a funnel for smoke. So nothing is supposed to be coming out of there, okay? And the Dursleys are terrified. They're ducking. They don't want to be hit. But Harry leapt into the air trying to catch the letter, okay? Although I don't know why he's only trying to catch one, because if I were him, I'd probably have grabbed a handful of them and run for my life. But okay, he was only interested in just reading one letter. That's all he wanted. Okay, out, out! Uncle Vernon seized Harry around the waist and threw him into the hall. When Aunt Petunia and Dudley had run out with their arms over their faces, Uncle Vernon slammed the door shut. They could hear the letters still streaming into the room, bouncing off the walls and the floor. That does it, said Uncle Vernon, trying to speak calmly but pulling great tufts out of his moustache at the same time. I want you back here in 5 minutes, ready to leave. We're going away. Just pack some clothes, no arguments. Okay, so now that even though they've got how many 100 letters flooding into their room, he doesn't care, okay? They are instead going to move out of the house. They're going somewhere for a while. He didn't say where, but he is angry because he said he's tried to speak calmly, but he's pulling great tufts out of his mustache. So he's literally pulling out hair from his mustache, okay? And that's something that people usually do when they're stressed. Okay, so he's not happy at all. He looked so dangerous with half his moustache missing that no one dared argue. 10 minutes later, they had wrenched their way through the boarded-up doors and were in the car, speeding toward the highway. Dudley was sniffling in the back seat. His father had hit him around the head for holding them up while he tried to pack his television, VCR, and computer in his sports bag. They drove and they drove. Even Aunt Petunia didn't dare ask where they were going. Every now and then, Uncle Vernon would take a sharp turn and drive in the opposite direction for a while. Shake 'em off, he would mutter whenever he did this. Okay, so we know that he was sort of driving in a weird zigzag pattern because he still thinks that they're being followed. They didn't stop to eat or drink all day. By nightfall, Dudley was howling. He'd never had such a bad day in his life. He was hungry, he'd missed 5 television programs he'd wanted to see, and he'd never gone so long without blowing up an alien on his computer. Uncle Vernon stopped at last outside a gloomy-looking hotel on the outskirts of a big city. Dudley and Harry shared a room with twin beds and damp, musty sheets. Dudley snored, but Harry stayed awake, sitting on the windowsill, staring down at the lights of passing cars and wondering. They ate stale cornflakes and cold tinned tomatoes on toast for breakfast the next day. They had just finished when the owner of the hotel came over to their table. "Excuse me, but is one of you Mr. H. Potter? Only I got about 100 of these on the front desk." She held up a letter so they could see the green ink address. Mr. H. Potter, Room 17, Railview Hotel, Cokeworth. Harry made a grab for the letter, but Uncle Vernon knocked his hand out of the way. The woman stared. "I'll take them," said Uncle Vernon, standing up quickly and following her from the dining room. "Wouldn't it be better just to go home, dear?" Aunt Petunia suggested, timidly, hours later, but Uncle Vernon didn't seem to hear her. Exactly what he was looking for, none of them knew. He drove them into the middle of a forest, got out, looked around, shook his head, got back in the car, and off they went again. The same thing happened in the middle of a ploughed field, halfway across a suspension bridge, and at the top of a multi-level parking garage. "Oh, hello, Sean. Yes, there is a lucky draw tomorrow, but it is one that's already done. So the campaign had been running until February of this year. So the names have already been, the participants have already been collected, the list. So tomorrow they'll be drawing the names. Okay, so all these amazing prizes you see on the table in front of me is for that. Yes. Okay. Hello, Miss Lovely and Jaslyn. Welcome to the live. Okay, we are in the middle of chapter 3 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So thank you for joining, and I hope you are enjoying your afternoon with us on this live. So we just got through a little passage about how stressed Uncle Vernon is, okay? So even though they stayed at the hotel at the last minute, it was quite random. They didn't choose where to go. He was just driving in a random pattern until they got just outside of the city. They got to a hotel. And yet, there was already 100 letters with the room number of the hotel that they were staying in. Okay, so whoever this was that was trying to send Harry a letter, okay, they knew exactly where he was at all times. So now they are quite perplexed. They're quite shocked and uncertain as to how this could happen, right? How can they... also take note, this is in... would be in the early 90s. Okay? So we are not talking about high-speed internet and having real-time information, again, somebody wiretapping you in this way, okay? Not impossible, but very hard, especially for just a suburban family. Okay, so even Aunt Petunia is suggesting, wouldn't it be better if we just go home? But Uncle Vernon didn't want to hear her. Okay, and he was looking for something, so they kept stopping in the middle of a forest. They got back in the car. They went to a field, a suspension bridge, into a multi-level parking garage, so many things, and they have no idea what Uncle Vernon is looking for. But Uncle Vernon is very sure that there's something there. Daddy's gone mad, hasn't he? Dudley asked Aunt Petunia dully, late that afternoon. Uncle Vernon had parked at the coast, locked them all inside the car, and disappeared. It started to rain. Great drops beat on the roof of the car. Dudley snivelled. It's Monday, he told his mother. The great Humberto's on tonight. I want to stay somewhere with a television. Monday. This reminded Harry of something. If it was Monday, and you could usually count on Dudley to know the days of the week because of television, then tomorrow, Tuesday, was Harry's 11th birthday. Of course, his birthdays were never exactly fun. Last year, the Dursleys had given him a coat hanger and a pair of Uncle Vernon's old socks. Still, you weren't 11 every day. So now they are in the middle of nowhere, okay? Something strange is happening to them. Uncle Vernon is being a bit odd, and Harry is having a birthday the next day. But it's quite strange, right? In a weird way, he maybe is looking forward to it, but he also knows that it's not going to be a fun one, especially when the family is so stressed. Okay? I guess it's some consolation that they still remembered his birthday and gave him something. But I don't know how much of a consolation it is, considering they gave him a coat hanger, okay, and a pair of Uncle Vernon's old socks. Not even new ones. Uncle Vernon was back and he was smiling. He was also carrying a long, thin package and didn't answer Aunt Petunia when she asked what he bought. Found the perfect place, he said. Come on, everyone out. It was very cold outside the car. Uncle Vernon was pointing at what looked like a large rock way out at sea. Perched on top of the rock was the most miserable little shack you could imagine. One thing was certain, there was no television in there. Storm forecast for tonight, said Uncle Vernon gleefully, clapping his hands together. And this gentleman's kindly agreed to lend us his boat. A toothless old man came ambling up to them, pointing with a rather wicked grin at an old rowboat bobbing in the iron-grey water below them. So a few things here. Ambling would be sort of padding up to them, okay, in a sort of genial, gentle way. But you could also say toothless old man, so he's quite happy to be having them interested in staying in this little miserable shack in the middle of the sea. But then they say it's an iron-grey water, so likely it is murky from a number of things, okay? It could be just dirty, or it could be that because they're expecting a storm, it could be rough seas. And what they have is an old rowboat, okay, bobbing around in the water. So it's not even a power boat or any sort of, it's just a rowboat. I've already got us some rations, said Uncle Vernon, so all aboard. Okay, rations here refer to snacks and foods and whatnot. It was freezing in the boat. Icy sea spray and rain crept down their necks, and a chilly wind whipped their faces. After what seemed like hours, they reached the rock, where Uncle Vernon, slipping and sliding, led the way to the broken-down house. So now we know it was raining, which suggests that the sea was very choppy, and usually that would cause a lot of sand and whatnot to cause the water to become murky. Okay. So not just that, icy sea spray, because the tide will be very rough, okay, the water will be rough out there during such a storm, okay, and it's cold, it's very cold, okay, and the wind whipped their faces. The inside was horrible. It smelled strongly of seaweed, the wind whistled through the gaps in the wooden walls, and the fireplace was damp and empty. Now we know that fire doesn't stay very well in a damp fireplace, okay? There were only 2 rooms. Uncle Vernon's rations turned out to be a bag of chips each and 4 bananas. He tried to start a fire, but the empty chip bags just smoked and shriveled up. Could do with some of these letters now, eh? He said cheerfully. He was in a very good mood. Obviously, he thought nobody stood a chance of reaching them here in a storm to deliver mail. Harry privately agreed, though the thought didn't cheer him up at all. As night fell, the promised storm blew up around them. Spray from the high waves spluttered the walls of the hut, and a fierce wind rattled the filthy windows. Aunt Petunia found a few mouldy blankets in the second room and made up a bed for Dudley on the moth-eaten sofa. She and Uncle Vernon went off to the lumpy bed next door, and Harry was left to find the softest bit of floor he could and to curl up under the thinnest, most ragged blanket. So we already know it's freezing. They're in the middle of nowhere because it's a little sliver of rock in the middle of water. There's no land surrounding them. Okay, now this place is very run down. It's got filthy windows. Okay, the blankets were moldy, which suggests, because we were saying that the house was very damp. There's a smell of seaweed. The blankets are moldy. The sofa has been moth-eaten, so usually that means that the leather or the fabric has been eaten through, so it's not very secure. Okay, and the parents went to stay in the lumpy bed next door. And obviously they did not care about Harry. They didn't. Aunt Petunia made up the bed for Dudley, but she did not do the same for Harry. So Harry had to find whatever floor he could that was suitable for him to sleep on. Okay, most ragged blanket and the softest bit of floor. The storm raged more and more ferociously as the night went on. Harry couldn't sleep. He shivered and turned over, trying to get comfortable, his stomach rumbling with hunger. Dudley's snores were drowned by the low rolls of thunder that started near midnight. The lighted dial of Dudley's watch, which was dangling over the edge of the sofa on his fat wrist, told Harry that he'd be 11 in 10 minutes' time. He lay and watched his birthday tick nearer, wondering if the Dursleys would remember at all. Wondering whether the letter writer was now. Okay, so a few things, right? He's aware that his birthday will be soon, okay? And he's having pretty much the most miserable experience he could have. Though, he's quite calm about it, because in the grand scheme of things, he's probably like, well, this is the most eventful birthday I've had, because all my birthdays have been terrible, equally terrible, okay? And the only thing he's been wondering all day, right, is where the person who's sending him the letter, where they are, and whether he would still receive another letter. Although now it's very bleak, right, because Mr. Dursley has made sure that they are somewhere that cannot be reached easily at all. 5 minutes to go. Harry heard something creak outside. He hoped the roof wasn't going to fall in, although he might be warmer if it did. 4 minutes to go. Maybe the house in Privet Drive would be so full of letters when they got back that he'd be able to steal one somehow. 3 minutes to go. Was that the sea slapping hard on the rock like that? And 2 minutes to go. What was that funny crunching noise? Was the rock crumbling into the sea? 1 minute to go. And he'd be 11. 30 seconds, 20, 10, 9. Maybe he'd wake Dudley up just to annoy him. 3, 2, 1. Boom! The whole shack shivered and Harry sat bolt upright, staring at the door. Someone was outside knocking to come in. So this is such a good way to end the chapter, because now all of us are aching to know, right, who could be walking about outside. Okay, the crunching noise was likely the crunch of the boot, right, when you're walking over leaves or debris, things like that. And he heard a lot of noises outside. Okay, now there's somebody knocking on the door because, yeah, you're in the middle of the ocean, okay, where who could be there? Who could have reached there without that little rowboat they already had? Chapter 4, The Keeper of the Keys. So now they've given us a very cute illustration here, okay? So there's an owl on his shoulder, a quite large looking man with large boots and an umbrella. Yeah, we don't know about much about him, but they are referring to someone as the keeper of the keys. Let's see for a moment. Ooh, there's definitely more people today than was the last time. So thank you for coming, everybody. If you're tuning in to us reading Harry Potter, we are currently just gotten to chapter 4 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So thank you for coming. Okay. If you've read the book before, I hope you stick around and give us your thoughts as we go through it. If you haven't, all the more, please join us. Okay, I'll be taking you through likely the whole book in hopefully the next month or so. Okay, so the keeper of the keys. Boom! They knocked again. Dudley jerked awake. "Where's the cannon?" he said stupidly. There was a crash behind them, and Uncle Vernon came skidding into the room. He was holding a rifle in his hands. Now they knew what had been in the long, thin package he had brought with them. "Who's there?" he shouted. "I warn you, I'm armed." There was a pause. Then, smash! The door was hit with such force that it swung clean off its hinges and with a deafening crash landed flat on the floor. So now it's not just something crashing through the door. The entire door fell. Okay? Also take note that at this time there is a raging storm outside. Okay? So there's a lot of noises, a lot of thunder, a lot of external elements that add to the eeriness of the situation at the moment. So they're all terrified. Okay, Uncle Vernon had come in with a giant gun. And they'd all been woken up from their sleep. A giant of a man was standing in the doorway. His face was almost completely hidden by a long, shaggy mane of hair and a wild, tangled beard, but you could make out his eyes, glinting like black beetles under all the hair. The giant squeezed his way into the hut, stooping so that his head just brushed the ceiling. He bent down, picked up the door, and fitted it easily back into its frame. The noise of the storm outside dropped a little. He turned to look at them all. So quite a nice thing he did, right? He walked in, he trudged in with his big boots, and he still put the door back in its place. But they are not just exaggerating here, okay? So the narrator here describes the man as a giant, but then they back it up by saying that he stooped his head, meaning he had to walk in a bit like this to make sure that he wouldn't hit the ceiling, so that his head just brushed the ceiling. Now, most people would not be able to reach the ceiling, especially in what we are seeing as a hut or a giant structure in the middle of the sea. So we don't really know the size of the room, but we do know that he must be much bigger than all of them in the room, including Uncle Vernon, if he's able to, if he must stoop his head in order to be in the same room with them. Okay, couldn't make us a cup of tea, could you? It's not been an easy journey. He strode over to the sofa where Dudley sat frozen with fear. "Budge up, you great lump," said the stranger. Dudley squeaked and ran to hide behind his mother, who was crouching, terrified, behind Uncle Vernon. "And here's Harry," said the giant. Harry looked up into the fierce, wild, shadowy face and saw that the beetle eyes were crinkled in a smile. "Last time I saw you, you was only a baby," said the giant. "You look a lot like your dad, but you've got your mum's eyes." Uncle Vernon made a funny, rasping noise. I demand that you leave at once, sir, he said. You are breaking and entering. Oh, shut up, Dursley, you great prune, said the giant. He reached over the back of the sofa, jerked the gun out of Uncle Vernon's hands, bent it into a knot as easily as if it had been made of rubber, and threw it into the corner of the room. So we know that Uncle Vernon was holding a giant gun, right? A rifle that typically has a long barrel like this, whatever structure. I cannot, for the life of me, draw the rest of the gun, okay? But we're trying to say this, that is quite large. It is typically made of some sort of alloy, okay, metals, that would be very difficult to bend or transform in any way. But this man, he reached over the sofa and just plucked the gun out of Uncle Vernon's hands like it was a plush toy, okay? And he bent it into a knot, okay? So it's not that he just bent it upwards or he made an impression or broke it. No, he bent it into a knot, okay? Into a knot, as if it had been made of rubber. So he was so strong that he made it look easy, okay? And threw it into a corner of the room. Uncle Vernon made another funny noise, like a mouse being trodden on. Anyway, Harry, said the giant, turning his back on the Dursleys, a very happy birthday to you. Got something for you here. I might have sat on it at some point, but it'll taste all right. From an inside pocket of his black overcoat, he pulled a slightly squashed box. Harry opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a large, sticky chocolate cake with Happy Birthday Harry written on it in green icing. Harry looked up at the giant. He meant to say thank you, but the words got lost on the way to his mouth, and what he said instead was, "Who are you?" The giant chuckled. True, I haven't introduced myself. Rubeus Hagrid, Keeper of Keys and Grounds at Hogwarts. So now we know who the Keeper of Keys is, who was in our illustration. So now this is pretty much exactly what we are picturing, right? He's someone very large, very tall, got a wild hair, a large beard, okay? He came in with this huge overcoat, okay? And he kept a little... Imagine how big he must be, okay? Or how large his coat must be, or the coat pockets even, that he managed to fit a cake in it, regardless of how big this cake is, okay? Because they don't describe it as a muffin or a mini cake. He just says that it's a large sticky chocolate cake. Large cake, okay, that fits in his pocket. And it was addressed to Harry. It actually has his name on it. So imagine this is probably something that is probably the first birthday cake that Harry's ever received from anybody. And it is a stranger, but he doesn't feel like he's in danger. He's just curious. He says, "Who are you?" Okay, so now we know this is Rubeus Hagrid. Okay, and he works, and his title is Keeper of Keys and Grounds at something called Hogwarts. Okay, so then he held out an enormous hand and shook Harry's whole arm. What about that tea then, eh? He said, rubbing his hands together. I'd not say no to something stronger if you got it, mind. His eyes fell on the empty grate with the shriveled chip bags in it, and he snorted. He bent down over the fireplace. They couldn't see what he was doing, but when he drew back a second later, there was a roaring fire there. It filled the whole damp hut with flickering light, and Harry felt the warmth wash over him as though he'd sunk into a hot bath. So now we already know that this place is very damp, okay? Even the fireplace is damp, so it wouldn't keep the fire, even though they were trying to spark it with something quite a lot previously. And none of them managed, which is why they went to sleep in that darkness, in that cold, and they were like, you know what, we'll just tough it out for the night. But, again, this stranger from nowhere managed to come to this hut in the middle of the sea, okay, gave Harry a little present, and he bent the gun, he sculpted it into a knot, like rubber, like it was a balloon animal, for example. Okay, and he gave them a fire. So now everybody can be in peace for a little while, which is nice. The giant sat back down on the sofa, which sagged under his weight, and began taking all sorts of things out of the pockets of his coat. A copper kettle, a squashy package of sausages, a poker, a teapot, several chipped mugs, and a bottle of some amber liquid that he took a swig from before starting to make tea. Soon the hut was full of the sound and smell of sizzling sausage. Nobody said a thing while the giant was working, but as he slid the first 6 fat, juicy, slightly burnt sausages from the poker, Dudley fidgeted a little. Uncle Vernon said sharply, "Don't touch anything he gives you, Dudley." Because again, good advice, right? He is a stranger in their household. They have no idea what his motives are, considering he hasn't actually harmed them, and now he's just sitting there roasting his sausages that were randomly in his pocket, okay? And he was eating them. Okay, he even managed to fit a teapot, some mugs, so many things in his pocket, even a kettle. Okay, no idea where they came from or what his motive is, but he is having some tea and he's eating his sausages. Okay, he's having a snack. The giant chuckled darkly. "Your great puddin' of a son don't need fattening anymore, Dursley. Don't worry." He passed the sausages to Harry, who was so hungry he had never tasted anything so wonderful, but he still couldn't take his eyes off the giant. Finally, as nobody seemed about to explain anything, he said, "I'm sorry, but I still don't really know who you are." The giant took a gulp of tea and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Call me Hagrid," he said. "Everyone does. And like I told you, I'm keeper of keys at Hogwarts. You'll know all about Hogwarts, of course." No," said Harry. Hagrid looked shocked. "Sorry," Harry said quickly. "Sorry?" barked Hagrid, turning to stare at the Dursleys, who shrank back into the shadows. So the fact that they shrank back tells us two things, right? That they are, one of two things rather, okay, that they are terrified of him, or that they know that they should have told Harry about something called Hogwarts. Okay, because Hagrid, although he is quite strange, he doesn't seem to be posing a threat to them at this moment. "It's them as should be sorry. I know you weren't getting your letters, but I never thought you wouldn't even know about Hogwarts, for crying out loud. Did you never wonder where your parents learnt it all?" "All what?" asked Harry. "All what?" Hagrid thundered. Okay, now he's really shocked and angry. Okay, now wait just a second. He had leapt to his feet. In his anger, he seemed to fill the whole hut. The Dursleys were cowering against the wall. "Do you mean to tell me," he growled at the Dursleys, "that this boy, knows nothing about anything?" Harry thought this was going a bit far. He had been to school, after all, and his marks weren't bad. "I know some things," he said. I can, do math and stuff." Okay, now, note that Hagrid hasn't actually specified anything specific. So now Harry is taking it very much that, oh, no, I'm not incompetent. Okay, I know some things. I can read, I can do math, but this is not what Hagrid is referring to. Okay, and notice also, when Hagrid had come in, he never actually looked surprised at anybody in the room. So it suggests that he knows all the people. He only is bothering to address Harry, though. Okay? Also, because us as the reader, we know from chapter 1 that Hagrid was the person who had brought Harry to the Dursleys, right? He left Harry as a little baby boy on the doorstep of the Dursleys. So he knows all these people, but he hasn't seen Harry since that time. So 11 years later. Okay? But Hagrid simply waved his hand and said, "About our world, I mean. Your world, my world, your parents' world." "What world?" Hagrid looked as if he was about to explode. "Dursley!" he boomed. Uncle Vernon, who had gone very pale, whispered something that sounded like Mimblewimble. Hagrid stared wildly at Harry. But you must know about your mum and dad, he said. I mean, they're famous. You're famous. What? My mum and dad weren't famous, were they? You don't know. You don't know. Hagrid ran his fingers through his hair, fixing Harry with a bewildered stare. So bewildered here is shocked and confused, okay? Okay? He doesn't understand how Harry could not know this apparently vital piece of information, okay? That his parents were famous. You don't know what you are? He said finally. Uncle Vernon suddenly found his voice. Stop, he commanded. Stop right there, sir. I forbid you to tell the boy anything. A braver man than Vernon Dursley would have quailed under the furious look Hagrid now gave him. When Hagrid spoke, his every syllable trembled with rage. He was so angry, he enunciated his words to the nines. Okay? You never told him? Never told him what was in the letter Dumbledore left for him? I was there. I saw Dumbledore leave it, Dursley, and you've kept it from him all these years? Kept what from me? Said Harry eagerly. Stop! I forbid you! Yelled Uncle Vernon in panic. Aunt Petunia gave a gasp of horror. So she's literally in the corner just watching this go down, okay? Now we know that the Dursleys have kept some important information from Harry for all his life, right? Especially to do with the letter that Harry's just received and they refused to give him. Okay, now there's no going back. Now there is a giant in their living room who is forcing this information on Harry and in front of them and saying, no matter what, I'm going to reveal this information before you. Okay? Go boil your heads, both of you, said Hagrid. Harry, you're a wizard. Okay, this here, he is just really angry and he's telling them to, I don't care what you do with yourselves, you can boil your heads, you can run away, whatever, okay? You both are terrible, is what he's saying. Okay, Harry, you're a wizard. There was silence inside the hut. Only the sea and the whistling wind could be heard. I'm a what? Gasped Harry. A wizard, of course, said Hagrid, sitting back down on the sofa, which groaned and sank even lower. And a thumpin' good 'un, I'd say, once you've been trained up a bit. With a mum and dad like yours, what else would you be? And I reckon it's about time you read your letter. Here he says a thumpin' good one is just a dialogue expression, okay? Because now we know that Harry's parents were famous for something, right? But Harry still doesn't know this information. Harry stretched out his hand and at last took the yellowish envelope addressed in emerald green to Mr. H. Potter, the floor, hut on the rock, the sea. He pulled out the letter and read. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster Albus Dumbledore. Order of Merlin First Class. Grand Sorcerer, Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confederate of Wizards. International Confederation of Wizards, sorry. So this is his title, okay, that Harry still doesn't understand a lick of, mind you, okay. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of... Oh, where did my... This is what happens when I move too quickly, my bad. So, please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. So now a lot of information because finally Harry in this couple of days has managed to read this letter that he's been eagerly waiting to read, right? But there's so much information that he knows nothing about, right? What do you mean witchcraft and wizardry? Now he knows Hogwarts is the word that Hagrid kept using. He knows that it's a school. Okay, a lot of information here. Questions exploded inside Harry's head like fireworks, and he couldn't decide which to ask first. After a few minutes, he stammered. What does it mean? They await my owl. Galloping Gorgons, that reminds me, said Hagrid, clapping a hand to his forehead with enough force to knock over a cart horse, and from yet another pocket inside his overcoat he pulled an owl. A real, live, rather ruffled-looking owl, a long quill, and a roll of parchment. With his tongue between his teeth, he scribbled a note that Harry could read upside down. Dear Professor Dumbledore, given Harry his letter, taking him to buy his things tomorrow. Weather's horrible. Hope you're well. Hagrid. Hagrid rolled up the note, gave it to the owl, which clamped it in its beak, went to the door and threw the owl out into the storm. Then he came back and sat down, as though this was as normal as talking on the telephone. So now we know that the owl is clearly being used for something. And the entire time he had an owl tucked into his coat pocket and he forgot about it, okay? So Harry realized his mouth was open and closed it quickly. Where was I? Said Hagrid. But at that moment, Uncle Vernon, still ashen-faced but looking very angry, moved into the firelight. He's not going, he said. Hagrid grunted. I'd like to see a great muggle like you stop him, he said. A what? Said Harry, interested. A muggle, said Hagrid. It's what we call non-magic folk, like them. And it's your bad luck you grew up in a family of the biggest muggles I ever laid eyes on. We swore when we took him in we'd put a stop to that rubbish, said Uncle Vernon. Swore we'd stamp it out of him. Wizard indeed. You knew, said Harry. You knew I'm a wizard. Knew, shrieked Aunt Petunia suddenly. Knew? Of course we knew. How could you not be, my dratted sister being what she was? Oh, she got a letter just like that and disappeared off to that school. And came home every vacation with her pockets full of frog spawn, turning teacups into rats. I was the only one who saw her for what she was. A freak. But for my mother and father, oh no, it was Lily this and Lily that. They were proud of having a witch in the family. So now, the entire time, Aunt Petunia hasn't said a word, right? She's been in the corner of the room. Uncle Vernon was the one who was taking the reins. He was talking about so many things. He was being angry. He kept saying that, no, we are not going to let him go. No, you're not going to let him read the letter. No, you're not going to anything to do with this wizardry thing. And now Aunt Petunia finally lost it. She came out and she gave them all the information in plain sight. Okay, so a sister, Lily, who is Harry's mother, was a witch as well. Okay, but we know that Aunt Petunia does not approve of this. Okay, she calls her a freak. She stopped to draw a deep breath and then went ranting on. It seemed she had been wanting to say all of this for years. So we know they've been keeping the secret for a long time. So it's probably pouring out of her now. Then she met that Potter at school and they left and got married and had you. And of course, I knew you'd be just the same. Just as strange, just as abnormal. And then, if you please, she went and got herself blown up and he got landed with you. Harry had gone very white. Okay, he was white as a sheet. Okay, because it's too much information, first of all, and he's in shock. And now he can't even fathom what he's hearing. As soon as he found his voice, he said, "Blown up? You told me they died in a car crash." "Car crash?" roared Hagrid, jumping up so angrily that the Dursleys scuttled back into their corner. Scuttled is a good word to use, that they moved really quickly. We would say that ducks or geese or, birds like that scuttle about. Okay? Small, quick movements. How could a car crash kill Lily and James Potter? It's an outrage, a scandal. Harry Potter not knowing his own story when every kid in our world knows his name. But why? What happened? Harry asked urgently. The anger faded from Hagrid's face. He looked suddenly anxious. I never expected this, he said in a low, worried voice. I had no idea, when Dumbledore told me there might be trouble getting hold of you, how much you didn't know. Oh, Harry, I don't know if I'm the right person to tell you, but someone's gotta. You can't go off to Hogwarts not knowing. He threw a dirty look at the Dursleys. Well, it's best you know as much as I can tell you. Mind, I can't tell you everything. It's a great mystery, parts of it. He sat down, stared into the fire for a few seconds, and then said, It begins, I suppose, with a person called, but it's incredible you don't know his name, because everyone in our world knows. Who? Well, I don't like saying his name, if I can help it. No one does. Why not? Gulp and gargoyles. Harry, people are still scared. Blimey, this is difficult. See, there was this wizard who went bad. As bad as you could go. Worse. Worse than worse. His name was. Hagrid gulped, but no words came out. Could you write it down? Harry suggested. No, I can't spell it. All right. Voldemort. Now, this is a name we've actually come across already, right? Okay, in very much in the first paragraph first chapter as it was, we knew that it had Harry had to do something to do with Voldemort, and that he was a bad character. Okay, what we call our antagonist of the story. So Hagrid shuddered. So even Hagrid, okay, someone who is supposedly a giant, okay, who has all these tools, who was able to shout at Dursley, who could bend the gun in half and whatnot, okay, he is also terrified of Voldemort, and he doesn't like to say the name. Don't make me say it again. Anyway, this wizard, about 20 years ago now, started looking for followers. He got them too. Some were afraid, some just wanted a bit of his power, because he was getting himself power, all right. Dark days, Harry. Didn't know who to trust, didn't dare get friendly with strange wizards or witches. Terrible things happened. He was taking over. Course, some stood up to him, and he killed them. Horribly. One of the only safe places left was Hogwarts. Reckon Dumbledore's the only one you-know-who was afraid of. So we also know that you-know-who is a another name for Voldemort, for the people who didn't want to use the name Voldemort. Okay? He didn't dare try taking the school. Not just then, anyway. Now, your mum and dad were as good a witch and wizard as I ever knew. Head boy and girl at Hogwarts in their day. Suppose the mystery is why you-know-who never tried to get him on his side before. Probably knew they were too close to Dumbledore to want anything to do with the dark side. So now we know, while there's more information being given to us by Hagrid, thankfully, there's still a lot of terms and people that he's mentioning that none of us, okay, as the reader as well as Harry, knows anything about. Okay, and even Dursley and the Dursleys in the house, they only know a certain bit about this, right? They know the extent that Harry and his parents are wizards and witches, but they don't actually know all of these other things that have to do with it. Okay, so this is all going into the lore of wizardry, which we'll learn more about in the coming chapters. Okay, so quite a bit to unpack here. We will go through some of this again at the start of the next time I'm reading, but it is 1:30, so I will stop here for now. We've gone through quite a bit, quite a few pages this time though. So thank you so much for joining us. Okay, I'll be back afterwards at 2:30 to go through paper 2, the primary 6 prelim paper from Rosyth School from last year. Okay, and that will be at 2:30. So I hope you will join us then. Thank you so much.